Okay, let me just turn this on. Okay, we are going to do a little overview of the laws of Purim. A little bit of background knowledge about Purim, specifically as it relates to women, but our goal today is walk away with, yes, some background knowledge, but also practically what we can and cannot be doing on Purim, especially this year. There's a couple of small differences due to the fact that Purim is Motzei Shabbos, so a couple of different things that we want to keep in mind. So let's jump in. So the first thing that we're going to start with, and again, this is like a shorthand handout in front of you. It's not everything written out so clearly, but it'll be enough if you want to review at a later point. The first thing is the question of even participating in the reading of the Megillah. On the one hand, this is a classic mitzvah aseh she'azman grama, which means a positive mitzvah, which is time-bound. We know that women are not obligated in time-bound mitzvos. We have a whole bunch of examples, but women are not obligated in time-bound mitzvos. And yet, there is a Gemara that says that women are obligated to participate, to listen, and I use the word listen deliberately, but to participate in a general sense with the reading of Megillah. Okay? And the Gemara questions, why is that? It is ultimately a mitzvah aseh she'azman grama. It's a time-bound mitzvah. So the Gemara answers that since women were be'oso hanes, they were involved in that miracle, therefore they are obligated in the reading of Megillah. Okay, so what does it mean they were in the miracle? Two ways of understanding this. Rashi explains that they faced the same threat. It wasn't like Haman was going to only kill the men and allow the women to live. All the men and women were going to die, and therefore when they were saved, it's relevant to them as well. That's one explanation. The other explanation given by Tosfos is that since it wasn't just that women were threatened and saved, but rather since women played an instrumental role in the salvation itself, i.e., Esther and all that she did, that's why women are obligated. One way or another, one read of the Gemara implies that women are indeed obligated, even though it is a mitzvah aseh she'azman grama, even though it's a time-bound mitzvah. What's interesting is that there are 4 different sources that speak about women's obligation for the Megillah, and they contradict one another. 2 sources, the first 2, one in Megillah and one in Erechim, both state explicitly that women are obligated to read the Megillah. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. However, we have a section in the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, which says that women do not read the Megillah, and rather the Megillah must be read for women. In other words, a woman, yes, should be listening to the Megillah, but does not read the Megillah. Okay, right? So the right one is that women are obligated fully. One source says that women are obligated to listen to it, but not obligated to read it. And then you have the final source, the Deed in the Tosefta, which says that there's no obligation for women in the reading of the Megillah. Okay? So what do you do? What do you do when you have all these different sources and which seemingly are saying different things? So there is a major discussion, which we're going to do only like a tip of the iceberg type of overview. This is not doing justice to the topic, but I just want to share with you a couple of different approaches, and then we'll get into the final law. Yes, Lisa.
If the first 2 sources say women are obligated to read the Megillah, I'm assuming that somewhere it also says men are obligated to read the Megillah, but yet most men don't read it themselves. They also listen.
Correct, but so good. So when we say read, good. Let me unpack this a little bit. There is a principle called shomea ke'ona, which means that if I listen to something, it's as if I said it myself. Right? So whenever we say that a person has an obligation to say something, in theory, most of the time, it depends on the type of thing, but certainly like a tefillah or some like Torah reading or something like that, yeah, I have an obligation to read, like to Parsha Zachar, I have an obligation to make sure that I read Parsha Zachar, but I'm not going to read it, and someone else is going to read it, and I'm going to listen to it, and I fulfill my obligation of reading it. The question over here, though, is... Sorry? Same thing for Kiddush, yeah. Same thing for Kiddush, exactly. We all have obligation, both men and women obligation to say Kiddush, but one person says it. The question over here is, do women have an obligation to be saying it, and therefore could fulfill their obligation whether they say it or through someone else saying it for them? Or do they not even have an obligation to say it, they only have an obligation to listen? And they may not even be able to say it, since they're not obligated to say it. Or let's say a little differently, they would not be able to say it for someone else who has a different obligation. Right? In other words, when I'm listening to someone reading it, 2 things can be happening. You know, let's see the source. I think you're starting to see where this is going. Okay. So again, we have different sources. One say a woman's obligated to read the Megillah. One say a woman's obligated to listen to Megillah. And another source says women are not obligated to Megillah at all. How do we reconcile this? We'll share 4 different approaches, and let's see what they say. The first is Rashi, who says, and we're not going to do justice to the different contradictions. I just want to share with you 4 bottom lines, and then what the later poskim, what the later halachic authorities ultimately rule. Rashi says women are obligated to read just like men. They have that's what the Gemara said. The Gemara said that women were ba'oso hanes, they were in the same miracle, and therefore their obligation is identical to that of women, and therefore he writes that women could read the Megillah for a man. Okay, a man doesn't know how to read the Megillah, and there's a woman there who does know how to read the Megillah. She should read the Megillah for the man. That is how Rashi understands things. There is a source known as the Bahag, the Baal Hilchos Gedolos, a very early medieval source, and he writes something which is a little cryptic, and we'll see there are three different ways, there are more, but at least three different ways how to understand what he wrote. So one is, and this is what I was just kind of alluding to earlier, how Tosos explains the Baal Hilchos Gedolos' way of reconciling all these different sources. He says that women are obligated to listen to the Megillah, but not read the Megillah. So when the Gemara in A and B, Megillah 4 and Arachin 2b, said that women are obligated to read the Megillah, that was what we say lav dafka. That was not literal or critically written. It meant that women are obligated to listen to the Megillah, which is exactly what it says in the Jerusalem Talmud. Okay? And what he explains, is that there's a difference in the obligation to listen as opposed to reading. Reading the Megillah, he says, is more akin to like prayer. Okay? With prayer, we know that women are technically, although we've discussed this, what level of obligation do women have with tefillah? There are varying opinions, but certainly a lesser obligation than men do. And therefore, he is of the opinion that when it comes to reading the Megillah, women don't have that obligation. They do have an obligation, though, to listen. What's the difference? Listening is there's a concept with Megillah specifically that we want to be mefarseim hanes. We want to publicize. We want to let people know about the great miracle. Okay, and we're going to come back to that principle in a moment. But the idea is that it's important that we broadcast the miracle of Esther, of the Megillah. And therefore, women are obligated to listen to that story, but to read it, which is more akin to Kriyas HaTorah or to prayer, that women don't have the obligation to do. Right? So that's how he distinguishes between these two things. One thing to start thinking about is what is the bracha that we say before reading the Megillah? Likro is a Megillah, to read the Megillah, right? So let's say you are reading a Megillah, let's say it's women reading the Megillah, or a man reading the Megillah for women. Would you even say that bracha? We'll come back to that, right? But again, he's pointing out that there is a distinction between reading, that's one mitzvah, and there's another mitzvah that is very similar but not identical, which is listening to the Megillah. Okay? And he's suggesting that women have the obligation to listen, and men have an obligation to listen/read. Different obligation. Itch, you with me? Okay, let's see another approach. Tos has another explanation. And this is a famous and we'll say infamous idea, which is discussing in general the areas where women could we spoke about this not that long ago. This comes up in a number of places where women could technically fulfill an obligation for a man, but the Gemara speaks about the fact that this is somewhat embarrassing for the man. Okay, so let's take ourselves out of the 21st century. Let's take ourselves not that long ago, where women for the most part were not educated. Men were expected to be educated, and unless you were really not equipped, you were basically given at least you were given a basic education, and therefore, if you were to be sitting around, one example that's given is Birkas Hamazon. Let's say we're sitting around and finished a meal, and and a woman were to go ahead and say Birkas Hamazon on behalf of the man. Nowadays we kind of all say it for ourselves. Historically, one person would say it for others. Okay, so it's kind of shameful for this man who should have been educated enough to know Birkas Hamazon, and yet he doesn't, and the woman does know. The Gemara has a discussion about is it embarrassing, is it shameful for the man, and therefore it's better the woman does not do it because it's going to be embarrassing, because the expectation would have been that he should know it, and he does not. So the Tosfos gives another explanation where he says, really, women are obligated not only to listen, but also to read. They have the exact same obligation of men. But it would be inappropriate for a woman to read for a man because of this principle. Now we could discuss, which is a hot discussion, about what about nowadays when women are just as educated as men are, sometimes more, sometimes less, whatever it is, but we have the same opportunities available. Would that apply nowadays? Big discussion, not for today, but it is a major discussion. Rav Henkin, who quotes this approach, says, wait a second, based on this idea, would it be allowed for a teenage boy so fine, you want to tell me, accept this, that a woman can't read for a man because it might be embarrassing. Let's even say it applies nowadays. But would it be permitted for a teenage boy, a young kid, who is 13, 14, to read the Megillah for a group of women? He says, maybe not. Maybe not. If the principle is that we want to ensure that there's nothing like embarrassing over here, so if you want to say it's the Balkar, you're in Shul, and you have one guy who's reading the Megillah for everyone else, okay, fine. But if you want to have like a teenager reading for a group of women who are all learned, it's embarrassing. And therefore he takes that same principle and kind of like,
Why is it embarrassing?
because it's implying that they're less knowledgeable than him where they're not. Okay. It's a theory. No one, as far as I know, no one rules this way practically other than Rabbi Henkin. Okay, the last approach is the approach of the Kolbo, who's also explaining the Bahag, who says, no, women do have the same exact obligation as men, and therefore could read the Megillah for men, but there's a concern of Kol Isha, of the idea of, of women singing for a man. Does that apply to Torah reading? Does that apply to Tefillah? Big discussion. Bottom line is that's how he rules, and he says, therefore, technically a woman could, but because of Kol Isha, she cannot. Okay? One way, these are different approaches to explain it. The bottom line is like this. The Shulchan Aruch, if we were to read the Shulchan Aruch, he writes that a woman is allowed to read the Megillah for a man, and then he writes, V'yesh omrim, and some say that she cannot. So he leaves it as like this open-ended. Some say yes, some say no. Yes?
So what about, let's say, for a son, where Kol Isha is not an issue? Or is it
Yeah.
because not allowed to really sing for like fulfilling a mitzvah, even if it's
No. So it wouldn't be a mitzvah. It would. So yeah, I believe according to the Bahag,
or something like that?
according to the Kolbo, a wife would be allowed to read it for her husband. Yeah. Or a child, yeah, a relative. Yeah, exactly. The Ramah says she cannot. The Ramah paskins that a woman cannot read for a man, and that is the normative psak, I believe, in all Ashkenazic circles, that women do not read for men. Where you have still big discussions about women reading for women. So is that permitted based on everything we've seen over here? Would it be permitted? Yes, absolutely, right? So based on all these different approaches, even if you want to tell me, even if you take the approach, right? Let's go backwards. If you say it's Kol Isha, okay, there's no Kol Isha, woman to woman, not a problem. If you want to tell me it's embarrassing, it's not embarrassing, woman to woman. If you want to tell me that they have a different obligation than men, fine, they're reading for other women. They can't have men there, but they can read for other women, and according to Rashi, they can even read for men, no problem. Okay. However, there's a couple of approaches. One is the Korban Nesanel. There is a Korban Nesanel who has a pretty radical idea, who says that the notion of women laning Megillah is something which is intrinsically implies that the men in that community are not knowledgeable, and therefore is that same concern of embarrassing. I see you shaking your head. No, many disagree with him. I'm just telling you what he says. Don't shoot the messenger, okay? But meaning the argument is that it's not just in that particular, in as much as you accept the Gemara's concept that there is a notion of embarrassment, he says don't look at it in that room, look at it embarrassment in a broader context. If you have a community where you're unable to get, the men are not knowledgeable enough to be reading the Megillah, that's an embarrassment in a general sense, and that's his principle. We could hear it, we might disagree, but we could hear the application of, I could hear as where he's going with that. The Magen Avram, quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, quotes Kabbalistic sources that said that men should read for women. There are many who disagree. So technically speaking, for a woman to read for another woman, the Megillah is 100% acceptable. No one would tell you it's usher. There is a factor which recently we shifted a little bit, and that is by Megillah specifically, there's a notion of Barov Am Hadras Melech. There's a notion of having a community come together in as much people as possible. Meaning, if you had a choice between going to your next door neighbor who is going to have like 5 people stuff into your dining room and 15 people are going to go into your dining room and read the Megillah, or you're going to go to a shul with like 250 people, and assuming that it's not so chaotic that you can't hear the Megillah, but it's better to go to the place of 250 people, there's a notion of Barov Am Hadras Melech. So for many years I pushed back on having even a second minyan in our shul for this reason. We came to points where, especially people have, it's hard with young children to be able to, especially at night, to be able to go to Megillah together, and the children's bed's late, whatever. So we have a second minyan. But really, it's ideal to have one minyan, and that would be the biggest reason for at least a shul to say we're going to have one minyan, and to go and deliberately say, well, all the women will go down somewhere else. It does take away from the Barov Am, the congregation. But if the question is it mutter? It's 100% mutter for a woman to read the Megillah for other women. That would be 100% fine. Again, the Ramah says a woman should not read for a man, but a woman could read for a woman. It is 100% fine. No, I don't think there's anyone who would argue on that. Yes?
So if you know that, in my case, somebody comes to read for my husband, he can't make shul, but it's still better for me to go to shul, right? Even if I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes.
Okay, so for years I've been going to a smaller Megillah reading because it's pleasant.
It's a good question. I don't know where to draw the line. Meaning, and then during the day, I don't know. I go to one minyan, and my wife's like, she can't come the same minyan in the morning. So like sometime in random middle of the day, she'll like run off to like some minyan wherever it is. 2 people, 5 people, 100 people, doesn't matter. This is the convenient time. There is a value of Barov Am Hadras Melech. We try to set that up. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know where we counter that. Yeah.
And then
So-
I had this thought, but like on Purim, they're always looking for people to read Megillah, people who are sick and can't go to shul. So would it be inappropriate right off for a woman to read Megillah for another woman who's sick and can't go to shul?
I think it'd be totally fine. I mean, you have to check it with her. Meaning, some women we could understand that maybe without knowledge, but based on their upbringing, whatever it is, they might say like, oh, it's not allowed. If you know a woman who would be totally fine with that, 100%, I think it'd be great. Great. Yeah, it's very hard. My oldest daughter was born on like a few hours after Purim. So we were stuck in the hospital on Purim, and someone came to the hospital room, and they read the Megillah, and whatever, I couldn't hear a word they said. They were not confident. They were not capable. They weren't capable. And so I called a friend like a minute before, 20 minutes before Shkia, before sunset. He came running into the hospital and read the Megillah for me. We need people. It's hard. I was calling my friends I'm drunk. I'm like, I need someone who's sober. So finally some guy came. Whatever. Anyway, yeah. I think it'd be great. Yes.
So isn't there also to read from a cloth, right?
Yeah. Oh, you have to read from a cloth. Yeah.
That you have.
Oh, yeah. We're not saying no. Just yeah. No, men or women. We're not talking about.
Women reading from women, having a cloth, would be actually, rare.
Yeah, but there are minyanim, and yeah, they'd have to read from a cloth, 100%. It'd be the exact same reading, but such gatherings exist. Was there another hand?
Yeah, it's not a practical question. I just based on the background, it seems like this is embarrassment. There are some women who are universally known as scholars. Does that make a difference?
It does not. It does not. Although one could have made the argument that it should, but it does not. Generally speaking, we have general rules, and sometimes we have these exceptional cases. It wouldn't be enough. Historically, there were also great scholars who were. Yeah, 100%. But that wouldn't be enough to. Yeah. Okay. So. Fine. Bottom line is, again, men, halachically, according to the Ramah, women do not read for men it's because there could be a different obligation. Meaning it's kind of like Kiddush, where we speak about a bit, where we had a little bit of a discussion about this. A man comes home from shul where they have a lower level, they can fulfill someone for a higher level. It'd be the flip over here. In other words, a man may have a higher level of obligation, not only to hear, but to read, even though someone else is reading for them, and a woman has a different obligation. So certainly for a man to read for a woman to read for a man, based on their different obligations, everyone would agree according to Ashkenazim, cannot be done. Woman to read for a woman is permitted, and there's a consideration from a communal perspective about making, not having one gathering, but if a woman wants to read and have a small gathering, whatever it is, it's 100% mutter. Yes?
I don't know if this would ever come up, but if those who lived in a small community and the only one who knows how to read it is a woman.
Yeah. I don't know. They should ask their local Orthodox rabbi. Thank God it's not my issue. I love living in Baltimore. I have friends who live in these tiny. They have to deal with the Eruv, they have to deal with kashrus. Such a machaya living here. Okay, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Okay, I believe whatever. Probably we'd rely on the Shulchan Aruch in that case, but I'm not asking you. Okay, fine. So what happens if you come here, you come to a shul where there are men and women, and they're all fulfilling obligations. So the bracha you're going to hear before is likro es Megillah, to read the Megillah. If you go to a women's gathering, there are different opinions, but basically, according to most, they're supposed to say a different bracha, al shmias Megillah, right? On the obligation to hear the Megillah, based on this difference. Okay, so if you listen closely, that's typically what's said. I'm trying to remember if sometimes the man says it or sometimes a one woman. I believe one woman. Someone help me out here. One woman says the bracha. Okay, thank you. I've never attended. But I sorry?
It says here that if a man says it for a woman, he should say Al Shmias Megillah.
So typically, again, theoretically, a man could say it, but a woman should say it. I mean, it would be more appropriate because the man's not obligated in Shmiya. Correct, but he could still say the bracha a second. You could say the bracha a second time on behalf of someone else. Meaning, if let's.
But he's not fulfilling his own obligation. That's why he's not saying the.
So he's not saying likro because he already fulfilled. Correct. Sorry, let me take a step back. Thank you. If a man is reading the Megillah for the first time that night or day, he has an obligation likro, and therefore say likro. Many of the times you have these later minyanim, right, for women throughout the day who can't go to the early one, and the man who's reading the Megillah already heard or already lain somewhere. So what bracha should be made? As we just saw, there, according to one opinion, which is what the Ramah seems to go with, the women have a different obligation. So in such a case, we have a gathering, it's all women, and you have one man who already fulfilled his obligation. In that case, a different bracha is made. It's typically made by one of the women, lishmoa as a Megillah, to hear the Megillah, because again, according to the Ramah, which at least for us Ashkenazim, we understand, their obligation is not to read, it's to hear. And therefore a woman should say that bracha before the reading of the Megillah. Okay? That's Is that right? Okay. That is the end of our discussion about after there's no bracha. Some do the bracha, fine. Let's talk about Parshas Zachar. Okay. So everyone, comes to Shul on Parshas Zachar. Parshas Zachar is this week. We have an obligation to read about the story of Amalek attacking the Jewish people, and most people see it as an obligation on men and women. Question is, why is that? First of all, it's a time-bound mitzvah. It has a very particular time, and it can only be done during the day of Shabbos, Shabbos Zachar. So why is it that women go? So there are some who say, absolutely, women are completely exempt. The Sefer HaChinuch writes and others write that they are exempt. However, the Minchas Chinuch, there is a discussion about the obligation for warfare. How involved are women in warfare, right? Even in modern Israel, there's a bit of a discussion about women's connection, but we know. So some say women have no obligation of engaging in war whatsoever. The army in ancient Israel was made up of men. We didn't have our Joan of Arc. Like, it was all men. They were the only ones fighting.
But you had
Yael was not a warrior.
No,
She.
but they were involved.
Yeah. Good. So the Minchas Chinuch says, no, he says at the end of the day, women are obligated in war. It's just that they fight in a different way, which is exactly what you're saying. In other words, women, maybe they didn't fight in the sense they picked up a sword and shield, but what they did do is they prepared, the armory. They prepared, they were engaged. Or you could talk about particular individuals like Devorah and Yael who did get involved, but not even those exceptional cases. The masses mobilized, right? They did something, right? They involved themselves in some way in the war effort, and therefore women are obligated in war, and therefore some based on that want to say that even though it's a mitzvah saseh, Shazman Gram, it's a time-bound mitzvah, but war is something that women are obligated in as well, even if it's expressed differently than men. And since the passage of remembering Amalek is a war-oriented passage, it's basically a reminder about this fight with this, again, almost theoretical enemy. We don't have an Amalek nowadays, but the point is that it's a war-oriented, passage. Therefore, women are obligated in it as well, in as much as they are obligated in warfare. And this is the reason that many women make a very extra special effort to be in shul for this parsha. Now, it's a bit of a stretch. It's not something which is accepted by all. If you look at the classical sources, many reject this and say, what are you talking about? It's a mitzvah. It's not, it's true, it traces back to a war. But the bottom line is, it's not like we're not fighting war when we come to shul. We're just listening to the Torah reading. It's not like we're not engaging in a war. Like, why would you say that the parsha itself, it goes back to the rules of war? And therefore there are many who say, women are not obligated to listen to this parsha. So practically speaking, it's a beautiful thing that many women come to shul on, who wouldn't otherwise come to shul, come on Parsha Zachar. And it certainly would encourage it as an ideal, but it's not like an absolute. If a woman misses it, whereas a man misses it, you miss out. Like, this is a mitzvah that you have like a very unique opportunity, and if you miss it, the whole discussion of can it be made up, and whatever, we're not going to get into that, but the bottom line is a woman misses it, okay, that's it. You try, you don't make it, it's all good. Yes?
If you've heard it during the year, though.
Yeah. So there are those who say that you could fulfill it at other times. You could hear it, throughout the year. We do the regular, the laning and Dvarim when we do it then. Yeah. Yes.
Does anyone bring up the idea that even though this, Parsha Zachor is time-bound, but the mitzvah of Teres Amalek is not time-bound?
It's possible. I don't remember. I'm not sure. Yeah. The bottom line is, practically, this is I believe it's a minority view who says that women are obligated to attend for Parshat Amalek. Again, I don't want to upend, it's a beautiful thing. It's it's inappropriate to tell people, stay back if you're doing something. The Gemara says, if everyone's doing something beautiful, don't be the, you don't have to do it. It's a terrible thing. But the reason I mention it is because sometimes people lose their mind and they stress themselves out. I don't know, whatever, a person's ill and it's hard for them to get out and they're going crazy. No, come to shul. It's great things to come to shul. It's always good things to come to shul. Certainly on this parsha. But the bottom line is to think it's an absolute obligation. It's not. Questions? Comments? Yes.
So, do rabbis think of this as a Shabbat where they might reach a broader swath of the congregation?
It's inside trading over here. So typically, more people do come on Parsha Zachar. Yes, absolutely. Should probably take more advantage of it. Yeah. Thank you. A point well taken. Okay. So let's talk about a few other mitzvahs now as they relate to Purim itself. We have a minhag. It's a very, very ancient minhag called Machzis HaShekel. Okay, so what is the minhag of Machzis HaShekel? It's actually brought down as one of the oldest customs that we have. It's not a law, but it's an ancient custom. And what is the custom? So historically, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, they would make an announcement on Rosh Chodesh Adar to remind everyone to give a half shekel coin. What was the half shekel coin used for? It was used to buy the daily offerings that were brought on behalf of the entire community. So if you wanted to be part of the daily offerings, which you did as a person living in Israel or out of Israel, but a Jewish person, you wanted to be part of the daily offerings brought on the base of Mikdash, you would contribute your half shekel, and that money was used, so you're part of the pot. You want to be part of it, okay? And they made this announcement on Rosh Chodesh Adar, okay? Now, we don't give the half shekel on Rosh Chodesh Adar. We kind of connect it to Purim, okay? And it seems like even after the base of Mikdash was destroyed, we don't know exactly when, but this minhag was maintained that although we had no base HaMikdash to give it to, we had no, right, the base of Mikdash was destroyed, but a person would still give a half shekel. Okay. Now they didn't necessarily have shekels in Babylon or eventually in Spain, but they would always give, like, they would take the single unit, like the regular unit, let's say $1 or whatever it is in all these different countries, and they would give a half of that unit. However, they would do more than a half. It does, when it talks about this gift, it used the word truma 3 times, and therefore they would give 3 half coins. So let's say you lived in the United States of America, so you'd give $1.50, 50 cents, 50 cents, 50 cents. Okay, and you would try to give 3 half coins. Now, you and I don't typically have 50 cents coins, right? So what is done is that I have in my office a bunch of half dollars, okay, 50-cent coins, and I tape them up together so you could have them all as one. And basically what a person should do to fulfill this minhag is they give $1.50 into like a basket where these coins are, that basically, in doing so, they purchase the 3 half coins, they pick it up. In picking it up, it now becomes theirs, and then they put it in, so they fulfill the obligation, right? So by giving the $1.50, you just now make an exchange with the basket, with me, not me, the shul, who owns the $1.50. You then take the $1.50, make it your own, and then you give the $1.50, and then you've just contributed the $1.50, fulfilling this minhag, okay?
Where's the money going to?
So the money nowadays goes to tzedakah, for us.
To the shul? I mean, is it
For-
like, since it was the base of Mikdash, is it to the shul?
So we don't give it to the shul. I can't speak for any other place. For us, I give it to. I include it in the Matanos Lavyonim that we give on, which I'll come back to in a moment. We give it to the poor. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to use the word Matanos Lavyonim because they're 2 separate mitzvos. But for us, I give it ultimately to the poor. Okay. So a couple of points about this mitzvah. First of all, it's independent of the mitzvah of giving gifts to the poor on Purim. Okay, it's very important that we see them as distinct. In other words, by doing the half shekel, it's not enough to fulfill your obligation. You have a specific obligation, which we'll get to in a moment, of giving money to those who are in need on Purim, and they are 2 separate mitzvos. Okay? Another piece, which is that the custom, there are different customs about the machzah shekel. Some people just give one on behalf of every household. So you could be a household of 15 people, I don't know, a big household. One person would give on behalf of everyone. That's cool. Some people have a minhag to give on behalf of every member of the household. Some people go so far as to say if a woman is pregnant, she gives on behalf of the unborn child. That might be pushed, whatever, fine, it doesn't matter. The point is that there are different customs. I think the more normative custom is to give on behalf of every member of the household. And so, for example, what I do is I will take some cash or write a check for the amount, $1.50 times the members of my household. I'll put it in that basket where we keep this dollar, we put it in the back of the shul, and then I'll pick it up once, pick it up twice, pick it up 3 times, etc. Do it amount of times for the members of the household, and then I fulfill my obligation. When do you do this? So typically it's done on Tainus Esther, which is usually Erev Purim, okay? Now, this year, Tainus Esther is on Thursday, and Purim is on Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night. So most say you should still do it on Tainus Esther. I know that's challenging. Not everyone goes to shul on Tainus Esther. So there are others who say you could even do it on Purim, and therefore, if you don't come to shul on Tainus Esther and you don't have your own 3 half dollars that you want to use, I'll keep a basket in the back of shul on Purim itself, and you could just do it then. Yes?
But can't your husband do it?
If one has a husband and they're able to, 100%, yeah. You don't have to do, I do it on behalf of my entire family. My kids, unfortunately, probably don't even know about this minhag because I do it for them. So, yes, one person can do it on behalf of someone else, if that's practical. If it's not, you could just come to shul and Purim and do it then.
Coins, do you have to do anything picking up, or you just put them in the basket?
If they're yours, then you can just put them in. Yeah. If they're yours, yeah. Okay.
At
Go
the
ahead.
bank, they wait for people.
They want these coins.
No, at the bank last year I went, or 2 years ago, she goes, we haven't had people coming in for the 50
Oh, that's
cent
funny.
pieces."
That's
Yeah,
so funny.
where are
Okay.
they this year?
Wow. To be a bank in the Jewish area, you really have to know your stuff. Okay. Yes.
Does it have,
Wells
do
Fargo.
you have
In the
to
atrium.
put $1.50 in to purchase the $1.50, or would it be repeat, or do you have to?
Oh, could you put more?
Okay.
You'd have to. You couldn't put less because that would be stealing from
Right.
charity. But you could put more. There's no ribis because you're giving it to charity. Ultimately, you're giving an extra donation. So yes, I round it up. You don't have to be exact, and many people will round it up or whatever, and that's totally fine. There'd be no issue of ribbis. Yeah, good. Yeah, important thing to bring up. I'll just mention parenthetically a beautiful idea from the Sfas Emes, or actually from the Chidushei Rim. He says that. When the Beis Hamikdash stood, so on the one hand, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, they gave their machzis shekel to the Beis Hamikdash. Such a beautiful thing, right? He says though, the machzis shekel that we give nowadays is even greater than the half shekel they gave then. So how could that be? That one goes to the Beis Hamikdash. This one goes to the poor. It goes nowhere ultimately. In other words, we give it to the poor as a default. Some people give it to the shul as a default. We have nowhere to really give it. He says that's exactly the point. He says, sometimes you have this like yearning, this deep feeling, and you're able to express that feeling in action. And then as soon as you do, the feeling is kind of over, right? In other words, I have this intense emotion, I want to do something, and then I find a way of channeling those emotions, and then the emotions are over, okay? But sometimes you have a feeling, and you have no way of really channeling it, and it just sits with you. Sometimes maybe you have a feeling you want to share with someone, you have no one to share with, and just it grows and it grows. You feel like you're bursting with that feeling. He says that feeling in some ways is so much stronger. We these half shekels are supposed to go to the karbanos, the Beis Hamikdash, and we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. And so we should be thinking as we give this, like yearning for it to go somewhere special. And the fact that it doesn't go somewhere, ideally that feeling should grow and grow and grow within us. And therefore he says the feeling that we have because we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, the emotions, the intense yearning that we have to have half shekels will actually be used are so much more powerful, so much more meaningful to God because they don't have any expression. Therefore they just grow and grow. Something to think about as we are making this quick exchange, to think, I wish, I yearn for a Beis Hamikdash so I could give it to them. And that emotion, says the Sfas Emes, is more precious to God than the half shekels that were given in the times of the temple, of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Yes, let's go now on to Matanos Lavyonim. There is an obligation to give gifts to the poor on Purim day. Okay. How much does a person have to give? The idea is that you have to give one meal to two poor people. In other words, one meal to one poor person, one meal to another poor person. Okay, so how much does a meal go for these days? I don't know. Depends where you live. I'd say $10. You could probably buy like a pizza and Coke and fries or something. Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'd say like $15 to $20. Probably $20, I think nowadays would be the appropriate amount to give to someone who's really in need. They could buy, can't do that. Can't give 20 to one person. You have to give 10 to one, 10 to another. Now, we live in a world where many of us don't go ahead and directly give to someone who is in need. And so there are organizations, whether it's Avos Yisrael, who will deliver for you. You could give them $20. And the idea is that the $20 are, so to speak, divided amongst different people, and they will fulfill your obligation for you. I collect as well, and I will distribute on Purim itself. And basically, if you know someone and you could tactfully, go ahead and somehow give them a gift card or whatever it is, fine. But many times we don't have that opportunity. So in such a case, you give to, whether it's a shul or whether it's an organization who is collecting. And it has to be a place where they're going to distribute for you on Purim. So, for example, you have many organizations which are collecting, and they're based in Israel. And they're going to deliver, maybe they're based in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. They're going to deliver on their Purim day. That's not our Purim day, right? So it's a beautiful thing to do, don't get me wrong. But you have to fulfill your obligation, you have to make sure that the matanot, the gifts, are given on Purim day. So again, if you give to Avos Yisrael $20, you're good to go. If you give to our shul $20, earmarked towards this, you're good to go. But you have to make sure that you're giving it to a cause that is going to contribute on Purim day. Again, not to institution. That would not fulfill this obligation. You have to give, it's beautiful to give, and on Purim we give to anyone who asks, the Gemara says, we try to distribute as much as we can, but in terms of fulfilling the core obligation, we're not giving to institutions, we're giving to people in need, people who could use the food, people who really have real needs. Yes?
You can give, I said the check before Purim, you distribute it after.
You could.
You don't have to do it that.
You don't have to give it on the day, but you have to make sure that the person you're giving it to, so basically what happens in theory is like if you give to the shul, like I'm basically acquiring it on your behalf on Purim day and contributing it on Purim day. That's the way it's basically understood. So you don't have to actually write the check on Purim day. Yeah.
So everyone is obligated.
Yeah.
In this.
So if you have a household,
and over, it's 20.
Correct. Yes, very important, right? So, right, it's not just the household itself, but my house, so I don't know. There's 4 adults in my household, 4 halachic adults in my household. They'd all be obligated to give their own $20. If they don't have their own $20, a parent gives them $20. They should all be giving their own $20 to tzedakah to fulfill their obligation. Yes, everyone is obligated. It's not by household; it's by person. Okay, so that's the big mitzvah of the day. The big mitzvah of the day is we help out the poor. The symbolism, many commentators say, is that we had nothing. We were completely dependent on God. We had our lives were at stake, and God could have so easily allowed us to go, and God, so to speak, gave to us. We were the destitute in the sense, not that we had no food, we had no life. God, we were basically Haman, that all-powerful, was going to destroy us, and yet God went ahead and looked out for us. And so similarly, we look out for others who are dependent on us for their assistance, okay? That's the big mitzvah of the day. The small mitzvah of the day is Mishlach Manos. Of course, our society gets it all wrong and goes all over the top for Mishlach Manos and gives the $20 and they're done for the Matanos Lavyonim. That is a mistake. That is a fallacy. That is completely backwards. And so what is the obligation for Mishlach Manos? You are obligated to give to one person 2 different food items. And yes, they could have the same bracha. We're not going to go into that. But if you give 2 types of cake, you give chocolate cake and sponge cake in the same box, and you give it to your neighbor, you just fulfilled your obligation from Mishlach Manos, and you are done. Done. If someone comes to your house and says, oh, here's a gift, you say, thank you so much. Thank you. And sometimes that happens, and that's okay. You don't have to give to every single person you ever met in your entire life. It's a nice thing, but it's certainly not the major obligation of the day. Which is important to keep that in mind. Another very important thing, which I see people doing by mistake, is that the mitzvah of Mishlach Manos has to be, the item has to be delivered on the day of Purim. So, for example, some of the schools that deliver Mishlach Manos on people's behalf, they do it before Purim. And they write in fine print, you're not fulfilling your obligation. No one reads the fine print. Like, what do you mean? I donated through this school, that school, or this institution. Many of them, like, one of the shows over here, they give a huge package to break your fast on Tainus Esther. It's beautiful. I love it. It's great. But no one's fulfilling the obligation of Mishlach Manos. It's a way of showing, oh, I know you exist, you're my friend, whatever. But it's not Mishlach Manos. So sometimes I'll get, like, packages the night before Purim. And that's fine. If I'm one of 100 people and they're going to deliver more the next day, that's fine. But don't think you're fulfilling your obligation if you are giving Mishlach Manos before Purim. Okay, so again, similar to the thing with giving Matanos Lavyonim. If you are giving to an organization which tells you, we will give it on Purim day, that's fine. You don't have to give them the check on Purim day. They're not going to help you if you do that. But you have to make sure the Mishlach Manos is delivered on that day. And just as a practical thing, think about someone who would appreciate this, right? So again, the obligation is not to give to every single person you know. The obligation is like to increase friendliness, in our family, like we just, we have a little tiny thing we do with my kids. They give like to all their friends. Okay, we're not like those crazy parents who like, no, this is the principle. Well, we let them give all their friends, but we say take 2 more and pick 2 kids who would really appreciate this, who are not your best friends, who would mean a lot for them if you just showed up and give them Mishlach Manos, visit them on Purim. That's okay. So I'm not saying I'm not crazy. Like, okay, fine, you need to give people. They'll think you're not your friend anymore. Give them, but give a little more. Think of some people out of your regular circle and give to them. That's the real idea, is increasing friendship. The idea is a friendship that's not here and you are increasing it. If you're giving it to someone who knows they are your best friends, it's nice, it's okay, but it's not like the real deal. The real deal is to give to people where it will increase the friendliness. Yes?
Is there a minhag, or what is the minhag of the kid comes to the door and somebody gives them like $1 or $50? I know Rebbetzin Heinemann did it every year with my kids.
Yeah,
Where's that coming from?
I think it comes from a place. I know when I lived in Yerushalayim, I lived in like Mea Shearim for a little bit. I was learning in yeshiva there, or Beis Yisrael, right next to Mea Shearim. And Hanukkah, they would do the same thing. The kids would come around and they'd expect money. And I believe they speak about the fact that this comes from this practice there, where you're giving to the poor, but it's embarrassing. Meaning back then they would really give to the poor, but it's embarrassing. So what they would do is they literally give to everyone. You'd give to everyone. So basically, kids would come to the door and they would actually be representing the parent. It's not like they're not going to go buy like a pack of gum. Like they really need it, but it's a way of basically not embarrassing anyone. Some suggest this is where Hanukkah geld comes from. Hanukkah geld comes from the fact that you give to all kids money, geld, real money, not just a gift, real money, because it was embarrassing for some to come, and therefore everyone would send their kids all around. All the kids would get money. Some people actually needed it, some people did not. So maybe as a giver, you're just scrutinizing. I imagine as some maybe a similar type of concept. It's a day where there is where there's a mitzvah to give tzedakah. So perhaps giving it to the kids was a way of doing it in a way that wasn't shameful. That kind of just held on. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So all these organizations that have cards.
Yeah.
It says on Purim, and they're all different charity organizations. So if you do that. That in lieu of your shell promise?
That's not. Yeah. You could do that as in lieu of, if you have, again, insert for a while, there's a sense of you have to give people. So if you want to give tzedakah and you want to go ahead and that way all your people, your friends know that you know they exist, that you're their friend, so that's a nice thing to do. But you do not fulfill your obligation of Mishlach Manos by them receiving a card. And again, depends on the charity. You may not even fulfill your obligation of Matanos Levyonim. If it's for, the shul, right? The shul. You're not fulfilling your obligation. You're giving to shul. Thank you. Please give us. But the bottom line is you don't fulfill Matanos Levyonim if you do that, right? So, yeah, yes.
I don't know if anybody paid attention. A lot of people give to a meet and they deliver shelters. This year they're mailing it from the U.S. through the U.S. Postal Service. So I saw that and said, oh well, this certainly isn't.
Yeah. Right. So again, all you have to do, I'll be honest, like my kids give a bunch of Shulchan Aruch, I give like one or two. That's it. Nice, whatever. Something, but that's it. It's all. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, even if all you gotta do is take two food items and bring it to anywhere and you're done.
Correct. Technically, 100%. Technically, it's all you need to do. Right, the basic mitzvah again, but you can put some thought into it. Think about someone who would really appreciate you. Bring over like some nice little thing, and that's it.
All the packages that you send.
Correct, exactly. Packages and the mailings and etc. Like, don't lose sight. Like, it's amazing. We've gone like so big that unfortunately, like many people, I am confident that many people don't fulfill their basic obligation because they've gone so big, right? So, basic idea on Purim Day, make sure that you're giving someone 2 food items. Okay, fine. Tainus Esther, okay? Briefly, let's just quickly do a summary over here. It's not so clear where the mitzvah of fasting on the day before Purim comes from. Okay, it's not actually explicit in the Megillah. There's a section in the Megillah which talks about fasts in the plural. The time, when did Esther fast? On Pesach, right? All the Mefarshim, and basically simple read of the Gemara is that Esther's fast, which was, by the way, a 3-day fast, not a 1-day fast, did not take place on Purim, on Tainus Esther, right? So where does this fast come from? There's a bunch of different reasons that are given. Some say it's a commemoration of Esther's fast. We can't fast on Pesach. You can't fast during the whole month of Nisan. You certainly can't fast on Pesach. So some say it's a commemoration. Some say that they were waging war on that day. And when they waged war, keep in mind, from a spiritual perspective, we need to be in a spiritual place. They would actually fast. It seems counterintuitive, but they would fast. And therefore, there's the idea that you fast on that day because that was the day they were fighting against Amalek. Some go so far as to say that it's the goal of fasting is to counter the indulgence of Purim. On Purim, everyone's eating and drinking. So on the day before, we show that we're not like hedonists, and basically we go ahead and we fast. And some say, as the Or Chaim and others write, that it's a fast of joy. Right? Fasting is not only, I don't know about you, I find Yom Kippur to be such an uplifting day. It's not like a sad day. Yom Kippur is like a beautiful, uplifting day. Tainus Esther is also like a happy fast. It's meant to be a day of coming close to God. It's a day that we remind ourselves of the fact that Esther was able to break through not only to Achashverosh, but to the King of Kings, and was able to connect him in that way, even though we stumbled so much. And so it's a beautiful day. It's a day of prayer. It's a day of coming close to Hashem, and it's a day of a quote-unquote joyous type of fast. So whichever approach you take, bottom line is there is an obligation due to its nature of not really stemming from the Gemara, and due to its joyous nature, typically we're a little bit more lenient about the threshold for breaking the tainus, for breaking the fast. Typically, whatever, we're not going to go into all the laws of fasting, but if a person's not feeling well at all, typically we say you could break it on Tainus Esther. I did just hear from someone that Rav Hershel Schechter from YU, is shared with others that he feels like this year we should not be as lenient as we normally are for Tainus Esther due to what's going on in the world. We are in an Eis Tzara. We are in a time where the Jewish people are in real distress, and therefore it's critical that people are able to fast. Again, if a person's really not feeling well, you should not be fasting, and all the regular laws. We're not saying that this is not like Doraisa. This is not like, you don't, but the point is that whereas normally a person has a little bit of a headache, you'll break the fast. Over here, with Tainus Esther, this year, we should really make a push to ensure that people try to fast. The Jewish people we need our prayers, okay? Fine, major discussion in general about, certainly a woman who's nursing or a woman who's pregnant should not be fasting. There's a general discussion about women who are rearing children, meaning have children of a young age, they're kind of running around with those children, if they have to fast in general for all the fasts other than Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. They're different minhagim. I'm not going to weigh in on this, but it is a big discussion amongst the poskim. Okay, let's just conclude with 2 relevant thoughts about Matzei Shabbos. Okay, Purim is Saturday night, okay? Due to this, there's probably going to be a decent amount of Chil Shabbos, desecration of Shabbos that's going to take place. In Israel, when Yom HaTzmaut, or Yom HaZikaron rather, falls out on Saturday nights, they push it off. Why do they push it off? Because they're afraid people are going to start traveling to all the tekeses, to all the ceremonies, and they're going to desecrate Shabbos. So there's a similar concern over here. We're not going to move Purim, but there's a similar concern because we have, you certainly can't be traveling on Shabbos, that we know, but you're also not allowed to prepare on Shabbos for the weekday, right? I can't go ahead and start doing weekday things on Shabbos for after Shabbos, right? So a person should not on Shabbos, let's say you have your costume and whatever it is, you cannot, it is forbidden to go ahead and start putting on that costume on Shabbos that you're ready when Purim starts to be in your costume, okay? Instead, after Shabbos is over, really should wait a minute or two. When we spoke about Tosefes Shabbos, wait a minute or two, and then you put on your costume. If you want to put on a costume, then you drive to shul, then you switch over your clothing. But you should really not do it before. Okay, not really should not. You cannot. It's forbidden to do it before. If that means you won't be wearing your costume for Megillah reading, it's okay. I only started wearing a costume because my family makes me wear a costume. You really should be wearing Shabbos clothes, by the way. But I'm just. Okay, shalom bye. So what's it called? So I wear a costume, but the point is that really you don't have to wear. Yeah, wearing a costume certainly for adults. Not really so well sourced, but it's fine to do it. Bottom line is, so it's just so important that we think about that. Not that. So for example, in our shul, we're going to have mincha. Normally, I give a class between mincha and marv. I'm not going to give that class. That way, people are going to go home, and then we're not going to start marv till 20 minutes after Shabbos. It gives people a little bit of time to get in their car, to walk over, whatever it is, get to shul. We'll start marv, and then we're going to say the Megillah. And the minhag, the minhag of Ashkenazim, is to then say Havdalah after the Megillah is read. It's like almost a way of like pushing off Shabbos, even though we're driving our cars and whatever it is. If you're gonna what you should do as soon as Shabbos is over is say Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechal. That allows you to go drive. That allows you to do malacha. But the actual Havdalah is only said after the Megillah is read, and those are the unique practices of Purim falling out on Motzei Shabbos. Questions? Thoughts? Yes.
You skipped number 13 about.
Oh, Suda and wine. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the Suda. There's an obligation to have a Suda on Purim. Commemorates the Suda, the festive meal that Achashverosh had. This is an obligation for both men and women. All the mitzvahs of Purim, as we saw, are obligated for both men and women. And the Suda should be had during the day. Really, it's supposed to be had during the second part of the day. Some people have a Suda in the morning. But the bottom line is there's an obligation to have a Suda on the second part of the day of Purim. And there's also a discussion of having wine. I'm not going to, it's a huge, we could have a whole hour class on the mitzvah of drinking. The one, based on the Gemara itself is a little bit complicated. The Gemara on the one hand says that Chayiv Inish Levasum, a person has to get intoxicated to the point that they cannot distinguish between Haman and Mordechai. And the Gemara, after giving that halacha, gives this well-known, fascinating, wild story of two sages who had a Purim Suda, and one of them killed the other one in his drunken stupor. And then the Gemara says, somehow, don't ask me questions, but he was brought back to life, whatever. And then the next year he invites him again. He says, hey, you want to come back to a Purim Suda? He says, I'm going to pass this year. Okay, so the Gemara, the question is like, what's going on? On the one hand, you just said get intoxicated. On the other hand, you're giving us a story telling us that getting drunk is dangerous, right? As we all know, we don't need, this day we don't need the Gemara to tell us that. So the bottom line is there are varying opinions. Some say you should not be drinking at all on Purim. Some say you should drink a little bit more than usual, and that's, that certainly is an acceptable approach to drink a little bit more than usual. If you don't drink any wine normally, don't drink any wine. If you drink a glass of wine once in a while, drink a glass and a half of wine. It's not, you're full of obligation. The Ramah says drink a little bit of wine and go to sleep, because when you're sleeping, you can't tell the difference between Mordechai and Haman. Okay, that's a little bit of a shticky, a clever approach. But the bottom line is there is, you should drink some wine if you're able to. We started, it's just a beautiful thing. Pride and joy of ours. Like a number of years ago, someone turned to us and said, their spouse was in was a recovering alcoholic, and basically said, Purim is actually an incredibly difficult day. They sometimes have to leave town because it's so hard. And they said, so they suggested we do an alcohol-free Purim Suda. And I thought it'd be like 15 people from like the AA community. And it turned out like a lot of people want to go to alcohol-free Purim Suda. And so there's like a ton of people come, some from that community, some not, which whatever. And it's a beautiful Suda. We have it every year. It's not like a pitch for the Suda. It's just, I think, I'm very proud. It's just such a nice thing. Bottom line is, so what do these people do? You should still drink something. If you're an alcoholic, you shall not. It's forbidden for you to go anywhere near alcohol. So the poskim do bring down, there is one posting who suggests that grape juice, you might be able to fulfill your obligation with grape juice. Now again, I can't speak I don't know enough about alcoholism. If that's going to trigger someone who drinks, they shouldn't drink grape juice either. But if you're able to drink grape juice, and that's not an issue, then there are some who say that it's not an inyan of intoxication, it's an inyan of a chashav drink, a special drink. And just like on Pesach, right? Do all of you have 4 cups of wine? Some of you yes, some of you no. But we all know you could have grape juice if you can't have wine. So similarly, one opinion wants to argue that you're allowed to drink grape juice to fulfill your obligation. So how much grape juice do you drink during the week? Probably none, unless you're a little kid drinking a little juice box, whatever. So if you are not drinking wine, take a cup of grape juice and fulfill your obligation that way. Okay. We'll end here. Have a beautiful Purim. There's no class next week, obviously, but have a beautiful Purim if you'd like. There is, after our non-alcoholic Purim Suda, we have a very alcoholic post-Purim Suda. We have a little kumsitz at my house, which is next door. It starts at 8 o'clock. Feel free to join us. Nice singing, beautiful singing. It's a nice setting. Nothing wild, but a beautiful little setting, so feel free to come by. Have a great Purim. Take care.